The orc woman appeared at the edge of Marrow's Bend on a gray morning in late autumn, soaked from the river crossing, carrying nothing but a bent iron poker wrapped in cloth. She did not speak. She did not even look at the men who stepped into the road to block her path. She simply stopped, set down the poker, and waited. And when no one moved, she picked it back up and walked on. By noon, half the town had a story about her. By evening, every door in Marrow's Bend was shut against her. Garrick Holt found her at dusk, sitting against the cold side of his forge wall, knees drawn up, the poker laid across her lap like something she meant to return. He was 64, a widower 3 years gone, and his hands still ached from a day spent shoeing the miller's stubborn gray mare. He looked at the orc woman a long moment. She looked back, not afraid, not pleading, just watching him the way a person watches weather, waiting to see which way it would turn. "That's a forge poker," he said. "Mine, by the look of the maker's mark." She held it out to him. "Found it on the road, did you?" He took it, turned it over. The tip was bent. He'd thrown it out himself, weeks back, after it warped in the coals. She had straightened it. Not perfectly, but straightened. The metal worked cold and patient, hammer marks small and careful all down the shaft. "You did this?" She nodded once. "Why?" She didn't answer. She only looked toward the forge door, then back at him, and Garrick understood, slowly, the way understanding comes to a man who has spent 30 years reading the weight and temper of iron rather than words. That this was the only language she had to offer, and she had offered it anyway, to a town that had already decided what she was. "Doors that way," he said, nodding toward the back of the smithy, where a lean-to held the woodpile and, behind it, a narrow room he hadn't used since his apprentice left for the coast. "Roof doesn't leak much. There's a stove." She didn't move. "I'm not asking anything," Garrick said. "Just, it's cold, and that room's empty, and I'd as soon something useful came of it instead of nothing." He set the mended poker against the forge wall, within her reach, and went inside to bank the fire for the night. In the morning, the poker was gone from where he'd left it. So was the woodpile's disorder. Every log split to a uniform length, stacked higher and tighter than Garrick had managed in years, and the forge fire was already lit, banked low and steady, exactly the way he liked it before a long day's work. The first week, Garrick tested her without meaning to. He left a cracked plowshare on the bench, with a note of measurements he didn't expect her to read. By evening it was mended, the crack drawn shut and hammered flat with a precision that would have taken him half a day, and the note sat folded beside it, untouched but not ignored, set carefully where he'd see it, a small acknowledgement that needed no reply. He left a second test the next day, half ashamed of himself for it. A horseshoe, deliberately misshapen, the kind of careless work that would embarrass any smith worth his trade. He wanted to see what she'd do with a flaw. Fix it silently, and say nothing of his clumsiness, or leave it as he'd left it, a judgment passed without words. She fixed it, and beside it she left a second horseshoe, perfect, unasked for, the twin of the one she'd corrected, as if to say, "This is what it should look like, and I think you already know that." Garrick laughed out loud, alone in his forge, for the first time in longer than he could remember. She did not speak that day, or the next, or the one after that. The town called her the Silent One, when they spoke of her at all, and most didn't. They crossed the street, or they didn't come to Garrick's forge for a week, until their plow blades and broken hinges piled up and pride lost out to need. Garrick never asked her name. He found instead that he didn't need words to work beside her. She had a gift with iron that startled him the first week, and humbled him by the second. Not brute strength, though she had that in plenty, but a stillness at the anvil, a patience with the heat that most men twice her age in the trade never learned. She watched him shape a hinge once, just once, and the next day produce 6 of them, each one true, each one better than his. He started leaving tools where she could reach them. She started leaving small things where he could find them. A cracked axe handle replaced overnight, his boots resoled with scrap leather and waxed thread, a clay pot of stew left warming on the stove on the evenings, his joints ached too much to cook. Old Mara Pell, who ran the dry goods store and missed nothing, cornered Garrick one market day. "Folk are saying things about that orc woman of yours. She's not mine. She's not anyone's. They're saying she can't speak, that something was done to her, somewhere east, that she's touched." Garrick thought of the 6 hinges, true as a level line, of the stew, still warm, set just where his hands would find it without looking, of the way she'd caught his arm 3 days back, wordless, and pointed at a hairline crack, creeping up the handle of the sledge before it could. shatter mid-swing, and take his fingers with it. "She's not touched," he said. "She just doesn't waste words on people who never gave her any worth listening to." Mara had no answer for that, and word of it traveled, the way words do in a small town, and slowly, carefully, the way ice gives at the edges of a pond before anyone notices the whole of it has thinned. Marrow's Bend began to look at the Silent One a little differently, not warmly, not yet, but less like a thing to fear, and more like a question no one had bothered to ask properly. By midwinter, a few of the braver souls had started leaving their broken tools at the forge door themselves, the way they once would have left them only for Garrick. And a few of those, returning to collect their mended plowshares and hinges, found themselves lingering a moment longer than they needed to, watching the orc woman work, before they remembered themselves and hurried off. She never asked them to stay. She never seemed to expect anything different. But Garrick noticed that on the evening someone lingered. She worked a little longer at the anvil afterward, humming nothing he recognized, low and tuneless and content. Winter came hard that year, and with it came the trouble. It started past midnight, 3 months after she'd arrived. A popped knot in a green log, a spray of embers Garrick didn't see in his sleep, and by the time he woke choking on smoke, the woodpile against the lean-to wall was a wall of flame, and the fire was already licking at the dry timber framing of the forge itself. He was an old man, slow getting up, slower getting his boots on, and by the time he stumbled into the yard, the heat was a living thing, roaring, and the bucket line to the well felt 100 miles long. She was already there. She had the well bucket in one hand and was hauling it up two-handed, impossibly fast, throwing the water not at the flames directly, but along the timber edge where the fire hadn't yet caught, working the line the fire would take next, cutting it off before it arrived, the way a smith reads, where heat will travel through metal before it gets there. She shouted something at Garrick, the first sound he had ever heard her make, a single raw word in a language he didn't know, but he understood it anyway. Bucket. He grabbed the second bucket. Together they fought it, her at the well, hauling water with a strength that should have belonged to 3 men, him relaying it to the worst of the spreading edge, his lungs burning, his old knees screaming, neighbors, stumbling out of their houses now, drawn by the light and the smell of smoke, forming a ragged second line without anyone asking them to. It took until the sky began to gray to beat it back. The lean-to was gone, the woodpile a smoking ruin, but the forge stood, scorched along one wall, but standing, the anvil and the tools and the small room behind it untouched. Garrick sat down hard in the mud and the melted snow, too tired to stand, and looked up to find her crouched beside him, soot-streaked, breathing hard, one hand pressed to her side where she'd taken a fall against the woodpile in the dark. "You're hurt," he said. She shook her head, then winced, which answered the question her headshake hadn't. Around them, the neighbors who had come to help stood in a loose circle in the gray morning light, Marapel among them, and the miller, and the young family from 2 houses down, whose children Garrick had never once seen come near the forge. They were looking at the orc woman the way people look at something they have badly misjudged, and are only now, slowly, beginning to see whole. "She saved the forge," Garrick said, to all of them and to none of them. His voice cracked on it. "She saved my whole life's work, and half of you wouldn't give her the time of day for 3 months. No one argued. It was 2 days later, with the forge patched and a new woodpile rising. Half the town had shown up to help build it, awkward and quiet at first, then less so, that she spoke again, properly this time. Whole words, careful and slow, as though she'd kept them folded away so long she had to unfold them gently to keep them from tearing. Garrick was working the bellows, his side of the forge warm again when he felt her watching him. He looked up. "My name," she said, "is Vesha." He set down the bellows. "I had a forge once," she went on, each word coming a little easier than the last, like a hinge worked free of rust. "My own clan's forge. I was good at it, better than good. I was the best smith east of the Ashfold Ridge, and they knew it, and it didn't matter, because I wouldn't fight. And a smith who won't make weapons for war is no smith at all to people who only measure worth in blades." She looked down at her hands, at the old burn scars across the knuckles, scars Garrick had noticed the first week and never once asked about. "I left. I stopped speaking because every time I did, in every town, on every road, it only ever brought trouble. Questions, fear, doors closing. Silence was safer. Silence asked nothing and promised nothing, and no one could turn it against me. And now?" "Now," Vesha said, and for the first time since she had walked into Marrow's Bend, Something that was almost a smile crossed her face. Small, and uncertain, and entirely real. I have decided silence has done its work. I would rather speak and be wrong sometimes, and be heard, by someone who already knew most of what I had to say before I said it. Garrick didn't have words for that, not right away. 30 years at the forge had taught him plenty about iron, and very little about moments like this one. So he did the only thing that felt true. He picked up the mended poker, the one she'd left at his feet that first gray evening, still hanging on its hook by the door, still bearing her careful, patient hammer marks, and he held it out to her. "Then let's get back to work, Vesha," he said. "Two smiths run a forge faster than one." She took it. Her hand, when it brushed his, was steady and warm, and this time she didn't let go right away. That evening, Mara Pell came by the forge with a basket of bread and a jar of preserves, the kind of offering a neighbor makes when there's no good way to say, "I was wrong about you." She set it on the bench, looked at Vesha, and said simply, "Welcome to Marrow's Bend." It was the first time anyone in the town had said it to her, though Vesha had lived there through an entire winter. "Thank you," Vesha said, and the words came easier this time, smoother, like a gate that had been oiled and swung once already, for the bread, and for coming. Mara smiled, ducked her head, and left, and Garrick saw Vesha watch her go with an expression he hadn't seen on her before, not the careful watchfulness of a stranger braced for the next closed door, but something looser, lighter, the look of someone setting down a weight they'd carried it so long they'd forgotten. It was a weight at all. By spring, the sign over the forge door read two names instead of one, painted in Vesha's own careful hand, and Marrow's Bend, which had once crossed the street to avoid her, came from 3 Valleys over to have its iron worked by the woman who had, for so long, loved the town and the old man in it in silence, long before either had earned a single word.